All right, everyone, welcome to the Tonto's Demise Week 12 recap. 12 weeks in already. Last week of the regular season coming up here. And this week was one of the best, probably one of the more interesting weeks of the entire season, as I believe we only had 4 200-point scores before this. Now we have 6. And really just surprising results up and down the schedule here. So some of those teams near the bottom holding on, doing well, and knocking off the teams up near the top. Some people fighting for a playoff spot had their hopes maybe not entirely shot, but not looking too good for some people. And we've got a race for the last playoff spot, which we'll get into after we get through the review, I guess. Try to keep things as brief as possible here. Anyway, so like I said, a lot of I guess you could say upsets this week. So let's bounce right into it with the first one. Of course, is the defending champ, Gags to Riches, who I think I kind of wrote him off last week and said his point total was too low, that he really was probably out, had no chance to make it in. And, well, here we are 1 week later, and things have shaped up that he actually still is holding on to hope for a chance to squeak into the playoffs here, and maybe take that repeat champ money. So who knows? But I definitely think he's got an uphill battle to get there. A lot of things have to go your way, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, like I said, Gags to Riches holds on with his playoff hopes. He wins over Disco, putting a hurt on his playoff hopes, although he is still one place above Gags to Riches. The final score here was 175.4 to 118.3. So for Gags, pretty good scores up and down here. Quarterbacks pretty much the same score there, about mid to high 30s. Drew Brees 38.5. Gags, your 3 receivers were Dez Bryant, Devontae Adams, and Cooper Kupp, which Cooper Kupp has been a definite bonus here to your lineup since acquiring him from Detling. Probably, possibly a steal there that no one really paid attention to. Maybe Robert Woods being out is going to boost him, which obviously you can't figure that in whenever you're making a trade. Somebody getting hurt right somewhere down the line. So maybe just a little bit of luck there on your side in terms of that. But let's see, for Bryant, 6.5. Adams, 19, a little bit over 19. And same thing with Cooper Kupp, 19.5. Running backs were Adrian Peterson and Doug Martin. Looks like Peterson had just under 80 yards and Doug Martin just over 30. I think Doug Martin only played till halftime, or maybe not even halftime. He got a concussion, I think is what they said. And he did not play the second half there. So fortunately for Gags, didn't hurt him too much. Your tight end was Safarian Jenkins. Only 4.5 points for him. Started Marshawn Lynch in the flex because you didn't want to, but Rashard Matthews was out with an injury, and he ended up getting you 20 points, so you can't complain about that. Kicker was Zerline from the Rams. I see, looks like 4 field goals for him. Yahoo says 16, so it was probably closer to 17 or so. And then the Patriots defense against Miami had another good game. Yahoo says 22. I think it was more into the 30s somewhere. Enough to get past Disco, though. Like I said, Stafford, right around Breeze, 35.5. Excuse me. Your receivers were Michael Thomas, Amari Cooper, and Jarvis Landry. Once again, Landry is your highest scorer, which has seemed to happen pretty often this year. He was at 15, Michael Thomas just over 10, and Cooper just under 9 or 8, excuse me, on his only catch, which was fortunately a touchdown for you. But he looks like he had a concussion and a sprained ankle, possibly. So unsure about his status for the week coming up here, which is a week that you're going to need him the most out of the whole season. So we'll have to see what you can do there. Fortunately for you, Juju's probably still going to be out, so you can plug Martavis Bryant in there. Your running backs, McKissick and Carlos Hyde. Looks like McKissick, most of his stuff was in the air, and same thing with Carlos Hyde. Most of his stats were through the air. McKissick only got you about 2, a little bit over 2, and Hyde only about 4.5. Tight end Fedorowicz from the Texans, 7.5. You had Martavis in the flex there, hoping to cash in on no Juju, and looks like he had a touchdown, 4 for 40 and a touchdown, so a little bit over 14 points there. I think he had some rushing yards, so since he was in the flex, those counted for you. Gostowski, no field goals, all PATs, 5 of them, and the Steelers defense didn't do too well. Had a couple sacks, gave up a lot of points and a lot of yards. Yahoo says 4. I want to say it was closer to 10 or 12, something like that. But not enough this week to get past Gags to Riches. It's 175 points. That's a pretty good score. Going to get you a win more often than not. And unfortunately for Disco, 118 is more often than not going to get you a loss. So here when you needed it at most, Disco gets a loss and Gags gets the win. Disco is still in 7th place, set ahead of Gags to Riches, who is in 8th. You're both 5 and 7, and you are both playing for a playoff spot here in week 13, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Next matchup was Skellahor Isotopes versus Space Antelope. Space Antelope was looking to knock the Isotopes out of the playoffs, at least out of playoff contention, and maybe move up to a possible bye week, and he was not able to do it. A pretty similar score to the last matchup, as the Isotopes had 186.65 to Space Antelope's 115.5. Again, quarterbacks are pretty much the same, Carr and Cousins, 36.5 each. For the Isotopes, wide receivers, Diggs, Tyreek Hill, and went with Marvin Jones Jr. over Larry Fitzgerald, which turned out to be the right choice, although it didn't really make too much of a difference here in a 70-point margin of victory. Not to toot my own horn there, but so Diggs looks like 11.5. Tyreek Hill said both Diggs and Hill had some rushing yards that we had to cut off there. So pretty much the same thing, 11 for Hill. And Marvin Jones Jr. just under 29. 2 touchdowns for him, over 100 yards. Tevin Coleman and Jonathan Stewart were the running backs. Coleman taking advantage of Devontae Freeman being out the past few weeks. I think that's going to end this week here, so been fortunate to ride that for a couple weeks here. So we'll see what happens. I think if I were the Falcons, they really have no need to rush Freeman back, and I do believe he has a history of concussions. So they're doing well, and rushing him back might not be in his best interest, but we'll see what happens there. It'll definitely put a dent in Coleman's numbers, but he's definitely been taking advantage of his opportunity here. He had just under 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, while Jonathan Stewart had 25 yards, but he did get a touchdown, so about 8.5 points there. Gronkowski at tight end, 2 touchdowns, 25 points. Gurley in the flex, just under 17. Kicker was Prater from Detroit. Looks like 3 field goals, couple PATs, 13 or so. And then the Atlanta Falcons defense only had 1 sack. I don't think there were any turnovers, but they got the win. Did okay on points and yardage allowed. Yahoo says 7. I think it was right. I think it was probably about 13, 10 or 13, maybe not too much added on there. But enough to beat Space Antelope this week. Said Cousins, 36.5. His three wide receivers really hurt here. Doug Baldwin, T.Y. Hilton, and Danny Amendola. Baldwin 4.5, Hilton 3.5, Amendola 2.5. So your three receivers only combined for about 10 points, 10.5 maybe, which usually you want 10 points from at least every single guy, and you only got 10 combined from all three. That always hurts, especially when just one of the Isotopes wide receivers matched your three. That's always a recipe for defeat. Latavius Murray and Devontae Booker, you went with probably at the last minute over Joe Mixon. Turned out to be a bad decision. Points-wise, didn't cost you the matchup because, like I said, a 70-point margin there. But any points you can get going into these last few weeks, in terms of your standings there, you need all the points that you can get. And let's see, Murray, 80 yards and a touchdown. Let's see, Booker, only 11 yards there, so not much from him. I think Mixon was actually over 100 yards and a touchdown. So you probably won't be benching him again this year. Then your tight end, you actually had two of them. One at tight end, one at flex. As we know, Evan Engram dropped. I think you watching that game, he was dropping everything that was coming his way. He did catch 3 passes for only 20 yards. Travis Kelce, quiet game from him, only 7 points. Justin Tucker was your kicker. He was money as always, kicking long field goals there. He had a 50 and a 40-yarder, also a 30. Looks like he had, actually Yahoo says 14, but I think it was closer to 16 actually, with all the extra points there from the fractions. And then Baltimore defense, you went with them. I think you must have switched out Mixon and the Bengals defense there at the last minute. Mixon was a mistake. Baltimore's defense was probably a good one. They had 3 turnovers, did pretty good up and down. Yahoo says 17. I think it was closer to 30, maybe low 30s there. So pretty good score from there. But since all those single-digit scores, Baldwin, Hilton, Amendola, Booker, Engram, Kelce, that's not going to get you a win, and it wasn't enough to keep pace with those couple people ahead of you in the standings. It's going to make it a little even tighter there between you and FC Bahoric in terms of playoff positioning. We'll see where it comes down after this week. But you're still sitting in pretty good shape there. You're in 4th place at 8-4, while the Skellahor Isotopes actually move all the way up to 5-7, and they are in 6th place. So actually, currently in a playoff spot are the the Skellahor Isotopes, much to the chagrin of the rest of the league, I'm sure. All right, next matchup we had, just like week 1, we had some Huber on Huber action, and I believe it went the other way last time. I believe so. Let me take a real quick look. Maybe not real quick. It would have been week 1, right? Yes, it was as the Wolf Bears, who were formerly New Gods Mad Titans, took down the I can't even remember what. I'm drawing a blank on what Jay's team was called. Was it Everybody Ertz still? Okay. Back in week 1, and he is now the Bad Luck Bears. So that one so this matchup this week went the other way around, as the Everybody Ertz Bad Luck Bears crush the New Gods Mad Titans, Bad Luck Wolf Bears. The final score here, 207.95. to 116.85. So all these losing scores have been pretty close there in the 115 to 118 ballpark there. Interesting. Bad luck Bears. Jared Goff, he was the quarterback to pick up when you were desperate early on in the season. I think I was down to early on in the season. I think I was going back and forth between Goff and Trevor Siemian. And I think I went with Siemian mostly because I don't like having a quarterback and a running back from the same team. Although might not have been obviously it was the wrong decision. But plus I have to say I think Gurley has been doing at least half of his damage in the receiving game anyway. So actually might not have been a bad play having Goff and Gurley there. But he's been putting up good scores every single week. He was at 53.5. Speaking of scores in the 50s, once a year, it seems like, we have the Julio Jones explosion. I think that was a band back in the 70s, the Julio Jones explosion. But this week, Julio Jones goes off over 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, 12 catches. He did have like a 15-yard rush for the cherry on top, which we had to cut that off though. So his actual score, let me see, it was 54.3. So didn't get a chance to go back and look at it yet, but I believe so. It's probably one of the highest wide receiver scores. I think Julio Jones had the same thing last year at some point, like a huge game. I'll have to go back and check it out. Maybe post it on the Line app. 54.3. I remember Calvin Johnson having a game, at least one game. I think one year that I had him, he had a game like that, somewhat like along those lines, 50-some points. But so I'm not exactly sure on the specifics of what the highest receiver total ever in the league would be. But if this isn't it, it's got to be extremely close. Anyway, it's 109 points just from Goff and Julio Jones, which was almost enough to take down the Wolf Bears just by themselves. Your other 2 receivers were Golden Tate and Deshaun Jackson. Looks like Tate had 5.5, Jackson had 14. Maybe proving me a little bit wrong here. He's been putting up consistent numbers there, Deshaun Jackson. A couple catches and decent yardage every week or scoring a touchdown. Let's see, your running backs, Fournette and Frank Gore. It's actually Frank Gore who had a much better game. He had actually 12 points for you, while Fournette had only 2.5. No touchdowns or anything for him. Jimmy Graham, tight end, another touchdown, 12.5 points. And you actually had Mohamed Sanu in the flex, who had 8 for 64. But he also he threw one of the touchdown passes to Julio Jones. So you actually got all those passing stats since Mohamed Sanu was in your flex. You would have gotten the 4 yards for the touchdown if he had been in one of your wide receiver spots. But since he was there, you got the point for the completion. And I think it was about a 55-yard touchdown pass, which is about 2.5 points. So you got an extra 3.5, 4 points for having Mohamed Sanu in the flex there, just to add, as if your total wasn't high enough to begin with. Then your kicker, of course, Elliott of the Eagles. Only 1 field goal, a couple PATs. Yahoo says 8. And then the Seahawks defense, good matchup for them against San Francisco. Couple turnovers, couple sacks. Yahoo says 12. It was probably closer to 20, maybe a little bit higher than that. But enough to get past the bad luck Wolf Bears. Good performance from Carson Wentz from him. I almost said Carson Palmer. Carson Wentz, just under 50. Excuse me. But much like the Space Antelope before, and Space Antelope and Disco before. I'm seeing a lot of single-digit scores and a couple of zeros here, actually, in the rest of Jimmy's lineup. His receivers were Emmanuel Sanders, Michael Crabtree, and Ted Ginn. Sanders, only 4.2. Michael Crabtree got kicked out of the game for a fight before he could make any statistics there. So he was one of your zeros. And you didn't have Juju, thanks to his hamstring injury. So you played Ted Ginn, who actually looks like he was the third highest scorer on your team. He had a little bit over 14. Running backs C.J. Anderson and Melvin Gordon. Anderson has really trailed off into nowhere over the past few weeks. He only had 12 yards. And Melvin Gordon, not sure what's going on with him. He seems to be in a bit of a slide too, even though the Chargers have been on an absolute tear. He only got you 6.5 points, no touchdowns or anything. It's pretty much been the Keenan Allen show, I think, in San Diego. Or they're not San Diego anymore. They are now the Chargers these past few weeks there. Tight end was Vernon Davis. He was your other donut. Nothing from him. Le'Veon Bell, another good game from him. 28.5. He had 12 catches, almost 100 rushing yards. Not sure if he had a touchdown or not, but said 28.5. You'll always take that. Your kicker, also from the Steelers, was Boswell. He had that game-winning field goal to make up for his one missed PAT, and looks like he had about 6.5. Houston was your defense then. You went with them. They lost to Baltimore. Looks like they only had 1 sack, gave up a decent amount of yards, points. Yahoo says 4. I think it was either 4 or 7, maybe 10, somewhere right around there, but not too much of a bump there from the Texans defense there. And it's a huge win for Bad Luck Bears, as I believe by giving the Wolf Bears their 8th loss. Well, they're not hard to believe, but they are not quite eliminated from the playoffs at 4-8 and down in 9th place, while Bad Luck Bears moves to an even 6-6. He is pretty much guaranteed I actually think he is guaranteed, most likely because of his point totals. He is guaranteed the number 5 spot in the playoffs. So whoever, between FC Bahoric and Space Antelope, whoever finishes number 4 will get the Bad Luck Bears in the first round of the playoffs. All right, next matchup. The King of the Hill, Shawshank Athletics, trying to hold on and break our season win record. Trying to get to keep 1 loss. Excuse me. I think the best we've ever had is 11-2. So he was trying to hold on and maybe break that record, but he falls this week to the friggin' Laser Sharks, who, despite victory, is in 12th place. I think he actually moved down to 12th place. I'm not sure you were there last week. I think Mighty Midgets were in last place last week. And Kevin, Kevin, despite getting the victory, you drop in the standings to 12th place. Final score was 137.35 to 132.25. For the friggin' Laser Sharks, you got the win. Dak Prescott, another disappointing performance from him, though he said it didn't cost you here. Just under 23. Your wide receivers, Marquise Lee, Mike Evans, and Nelson Aguilar. Thank God for Nelson Aguilar, for you, recovering that fumble in the end zone and getting those 6 points, because without those points, you were about a 1-point loser this week instead of upsetting Shawshank. So send him a thank you note if you can. Maybe tweet at him a little thank you. Let's see. Lee had only 2.5. Evans just under 14. And then, like I said, with that recovery touchdown, Aguilar also had a receiving touchdown. He only had, looks like 30 or so receiving yards, so he didn't do too much in the air, but he did get those 2 touchdowns, which were the difference maker here. Your running backs were Orleans Darkwa and is it Damian Williams? Williams got hurt. Looks like he's doubtful for this week coming up. Darkwa only got you 3, and Williams only got you 4. Tight end, Zach Ertz, another big game from him. 10 catches, over 100 yards, and a touchdown. 26.3. Disappointing, though, for Ingram in the flex. Only 5.5. I do believe he had a receiving touchdown taken away by penalty, and they ended up kicking a field goal in there somewhere. So, fortunately for you, that didn't cost you. Your kicker was Succop from Tennessee, and your defense was Tennessee. Looks like Succop. A couple of field goals, a couple of PATs, probably about 9 points. And then Titans defense, 8 sacks, a couple turnovers, did pretty good yardage and stat and point wise. Yahoo says 17. I think it was closer to maybe 25 or 30, something around there. Just enough to sneak past Shawshank Athletics, though. He came down to Monday night. He had DeAndre Hopkins, always dangerous to give the potential to blow up and have a huge score. But no touchdowns for him. I'm trying to think what the point. I think you needed about 23.5 or 24 to get a win here, and he only got you 19.5. So close, but no cigar. If he would have gotten you a touchdown, that would have swung this the other way, but he was not able to. Tom Brady, only 40 points. Say only 40, because that's kind of a quiet one for him. Sid Hopkins, 19.5. Kenny Stills and Randall Cobb were your other 2 receivers. Stills, 7.5. And Randall Cobb, probably one of his higher scores of the year. He had 15.8. Just take a quick look. That is his second highest point total of the year after week 1, where he was at 17. But not enough to get you the win. Running backs, Ajayi and Samaje Perine. Ajayi, unlike last week, was pretty quiet, only 26 yards, while Perine had exactly 100. Doesn't look like any touchdowns here, so he got you 13 exactly. Then Olsen came back from his injury in your tight end spot there. He made 1 catch for 10 yards, so only 2 points. And it looks like he aggravated his foot injury, so he is day-to-day. Who knows? So that might be a problem for you going down the line. DeMarco Murray is your flex back now that you lost Chris Thompson, but plugged in Perine there to your starting lineup. Looks like he did okay, receiving a couple catches, but he didn't really do too much rushing-wise. He had 13.2. So he had a rushing touchdown, and he had 3 for 33 in receiving. So that's 12.3. So he must have only had like 10 yards rushing. Your kicker was Butker from Kansas City. He had 1 field goal and 1 PAT, only 5 points. And then kind of a quiet game from your Jacksonville Jaguars defense. Another thing that possibly shifted this matchup was giving up that field goal at the end and losing in overtime there. If they had won this game, said it was 24-24 going into overtime, and that field goal bumped Arizona to having too many points, so you lost 3 points there, and you lost 3 for them losing the game. So with that last field goal, I think it was it the longest field goal? Is it Phil Dawson, I want to say? I believe they said it was the longest field goal of his career, and that guy's been playing for like 20 years. So that's saying something. Quite the unfortunate luck there for Shawshank. So those, again, it all came down to a touchdown. Those 6 points would have shifted this matchup the other way, although they did have a fumble recovery for a touchdown. Yahoo says 16. I believe it was pretty close to that, maybe 19 or 22, something in that ballpark. But again, not quite enough to get past the friggin' Laser Sharks this week, as the Shawshank Athletics can no longer break the regular season best record, as he gets his second loss. He's at 10-2, although sitting pretty for a bye week. But I think he is going to have might have a chance to drop the regular season championship to Hillbillies on PCP here in Week 13. Both of you guys going to be fighting for that spot. If Hillbillies can get a win there and Shawshank loses, I believe actually Hillbillies on PCP is pretty far ahead in point total there. So this is a week. I think Shawshank, you've been in first place most of the season, and you could actually you got a serious chance to drop it here at the final week here. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure you're hoping to hold on there. But bittersweet victory for friggin' Laser Sharks, like I said, as he gets the win. But thanks to some other people getting wins and your point total being so low, you dropped to 12th place. So we'll see what happens. Trying to avoid being in the basement here and getting the Cursed Rivers jersey next year for the Dub C Hooligans. All right, next up, we had FC Bahorik going against Possum Magic. FC trying to pretty much put the final nail in Possum's coffin this year, and looks like he's probably going to be able to do it as Possum gets his 8th loss. His point total is kind of low. Don't think he's going to have a chance, even if all the other things fall. So the bunch of teams are 5 and 8. So FC Bahorik still trying to work his way up to a possible number 2 seed and maybe a bye week there, depending on how things shake out here in Week 13. But FC Bahorik gets the win this week. Final score 183.05 to Possum Magic 150.8. I actually think Possum Magic's score was a lot lower until he actually played the Eagles defense this week. I think he's been using Minnesota pretty much every week. So he's been cursed. I don't know if cursed would be the proper term, but he's been cursed with having 2 really good defenses this year. I'm surprised he didn't try to trade one of them at some point along the line. I think actually the Eagles defense might be one of the top ones this year. They've been doing pretty well. You played them this week, and I think Yahoo's, I don't know if I wrote it down or not. I guess not. But I think Yahoo says 17, but I think they actually accounted for close to 40, maybe 42. Like I had to tack on a lot of points to your team for the defense there. I think Yahoo, I think when I adjusted the score, it was actually plus 20. So whatever you lost from your running backs, so that's an extra 20 points after chopping the receiving stats from your 2 running backs there. So it was a big score from the Eagles defense this week, but not enough to get past FC Bahorik. Like I said, it's been the Keenan Allen show the past couple weeks. FC Bahorik quarterback Matt Ryan jumping up from his usual 38 to 48 this week, 48.5. Receivers AJ Green, Keenan Allen, and Alshon Jeffrey. AJ Green 11.5. Keenan Allen, like I said, actually 37.2. What did he have last week? He actually outscored Antonio Brown last week. He had 43.2. So about a 6-point slide there, but you'll take the 37, I'm sure. And then Alshon Jeffrey 5 for 52 and a touchdown. So another 16 points there. Running backs Dion Lewis and Kareem Hunt, and this one swung heavily in favor of it was Dion Lewis, who was over 100 yards but no touchdowns, and Kareem Hunt, who has spiraled into the abyss, along with Alex Smith. Only 17 yards, no touchdowns or anything from Kareem Hunt this week. Charles Clay in the tight end spot, he had 10 back from his knee injury. We'll see how long that lasts. And in the flex, you had Burkhead. So again, two Patriots running backs in your lineup. He actually scored 2 touchdowns, one on the ground and one in the air. Looks like he had 50 rushing yards. So he must have only had maybe like one catch for a few yards there because he was just over 19. So I mean, 17 of those points there just from rushing yards and touchdowns. So he must have had very little receiving wise, but he did get a touchdown. Kicker again, Hauschka from the Buffalo Bills. Looks like 3 field goals. I'm not sure if he had any PATs or not, but Yahoo says 12. It's probably closer to 13 and a half, I think. And then you went with the Saints defense. I think your defenses were playing each other. Unfortunately, you picked the wrong one, but fortunately, it did not affect the outcome here, as the Saints defense lost the game, gave up too many points. They did have a turnover and a couple sacks, but Yahoo says 10. I think it was right around there because, or maybe it was a little bit more because I don't think the Rams had a huge rushing total, but they did have a lot of passing yards. Pretty much everything. So you might have gained a little bit of points. It might have been like 13 or 16, something like that. Maybe just a slight bump from those yards allowed there, even though they lost the game. But it was enough to get past Boston Magic again this week. He had Russell Wilson, 45 points. His 3 receivers, been one of the weak spots in his lineup all year long. Who knows if things would be different if he had Chris Hogan, who he traded for, and in typical Chris Hogan fashion, gets injured and is hit between him and Amendola. Those guys are hard to trust because they are always getting hurt. It seems like I think that's probably the biggest issue with the trade for McCoy and Hogan is that you know what you're getting with McCoy. Those running backs who get all the the running backs that get all the carries and they're on the field all the time. Those guys are a dime a dozen. They're hard to find, but guys like Hogan, they're long-term prospects. They might blow up and have a couple good weeks, but it's fickle when it comes to wide receivers and being consistent. It's unlikely, at least not likely, that a guy like Hogan is going to keep putting up 20 points every single week for the rest of the season. But neither is McCoy, but wide receivers can be picked up off the waiver wire and get you 20 points every now and then. And running backs just are not as nearly easy to find there. So I think that might have been the biggest issue for some people, or probably, at least for me, looking at that trade that happened before. Well, we won't let it, just can't let it die, huh? that trade talks about these trades just moving to the past here. But anyway, again, one of the probably the weak point of Boston Magic this year, his receivers. He had Corey Davis, Jeremy Maclin, and Corey Coleman. Davis, 8 points. Maclin, only 1.5, and Coleman, 9.5. Your 2 running backs, no Zeke, so you got you got rid of Zeke, so he's not an option anyway. Lamar Miller and Alfred Morris. Looks like Miller had 50 and a touchdown, while Morris only had 3.5. Tight end Hunter Henry, he's been back and forth all year long, pretty inconsistent here. Taking a look at his game log real quick. He's got a couple weeks where he's been in the teens, but mostly mostly single-digit scores, a couple of zeros in there from him. So he's been extremely hit or miss. Kind of surprising this year. He showed a lot of potential last year, but I think they've been focusing on a lot of running and passes to running backs there, especially that, is it Eckler? I can't remember his name for sure. He's kind of been coming out of nowhere and been doing fairly well. taking away from Melvin Gordon's production there. But anyway, 18.5. You got a good one from him this week, but it wasn't enough. And then in the flex, Duke Johnson. Looks like 10.5 points from him. Kicker was McManus from Denver. Only 2 PATs, no field goals or anything. And again, the Eagles defense, I believe they were actually up into the low 40s, even though Yahoo says 17. So good score, good quarterback score, and good defense score, but not a whole lot in between. So it looks like only about 17 or 18 from your 3 receivers, about 12 or 13 from your 2 running backs. Said Miller did good, only 10 from Johnson. So said 150. That's a score that could always go either way. It's not bad. It's not great either, but about a 50-50 shot that you're going to get a win with 150. Unfortunately for you this week, it was not to happen. Not to be, I guess I should say. And FC Bohoric, he moves to 8-4. Boston Magic on the opposite end of the spectrum, he is 4-8. FC Bohoric, 3rd place. Boston Magic, 11th place. And final matchup was, I believe, the 12th place Mighty Midgets going up against the 2nd place Hillbillies on PCP. And the Mighty Midgets come out of nowhere and have their best week of the season by far, I would have to say, as he actually goes well over 200 points and knocks off Hillbillies on PCP, despite Hillbillies actually putting up a pretty good score themselves. Final score, 213.3 to 176.65. So either a lot of pretty high scores this week. It was either really high or really low there. It said 170, 180, couple 200s there. And the other end of the spectrum there was those like 115 to 118 there. So pretty interesting week in terms of scores. For Mighty Midgets, some redemption. Maybe make his season a little bit something to hang your hat on here, taking down Hillbillies, who is trying to, even though he's pretty set in a bye week right now, he's still trying to make his way into 1st place for the regular season championship. Or he could also, he's also trying to avoid dropping out of the chance for a bye week too here. So Mighty Midgets did not do him any favors, knocking him off this week. So something to be happy about there for Mighty Midgets on your season. And going out on a positive note for you. Let's see, your quarterback was Cam. You had just over 30 from him. Receivers were Cooks, Funchess, and Crowder. I think Crowder had his best game of the year. He was over 27. Funchess, 17.5. And Cooks, 21.5. So some good scores there, almost 20, close to 20 or over 20 from each one of your guys there, making up for a kind of low score from Cam. Although I see Cam and Funchess both have Qs going into this week, so you'll have to keep an eye on that. Your running backs, Abdullah and Derrick Henry. Looks like Abdullah, only 14 yards, and Henry, just under 80. So about 10 points there from those two combined. Tight end, Kyle Rudolph, he only had 4 catches, but he did have 2 touchdowns. Excuse me. 22.5 from him. And then Alvin Kamara in the flex, who has just been bonkers the past few weeks, consistently putting up huge numbers, especially in the receiving game. Take a quick look at his game log. Alvin Kamara, his last 4 games have been 31, 27, 25, and 36. So he has been going crazy. So he's probably going to be one of the better keepers for next year. Don't know how many people tried to. Still kind of surprised that New Gods Mad Titans gave up on him. But he said he needed a quarterback. He got one. Wentz has definitely been Wentz has not been the problem on your team. So maybe if you still had Kamara and had maybe just gone with Mariota, or just whoever you could pick up along the way. Even Case Keenum might have been, before Brian picked him up, might have been a decent option for you there, somewhere along the line. But looks like, getting rid of Kamara is just, it's easy to say now, of course, but that's going to be a decision that's probably going to haunt you for at least until probably at least into next season. If it was me, it would definitely be stewing on that all off season. That Alvin Kamara will not be yours anytime soon. So, like I said, 36.8 actually for him. Kicker was Bryant from Atlanta. A couple field goals, a couple PATs, about 12. And then you went with the Redskins defense, who actually did really well against the Giants. I think the Giants actually only had... they were one of the teams that I think defenses only gave up single-digit first downs. I can't remember who the other team was. I think, was it... I don't think it was Cleveland. It was the Bears. But who did the Bears play? I don't think... Did anybody... Who had their defense? The Bears played... It was... Why can't I think of it? It was the Eagles. That was the other huge defensive score. They had... I think they actually had maybe only 6 first downs or something like that. Talking about the Bears here, they only had... If I remember correctly, they only had like 6 rushing yards on the entire game, which is surprising. Not very often that's going to happen. Unfortunately, said for Possum, that wasn't said. It's disappointing when you see that happen and you still can't get a win. But get back to the Redskins here, which is the topic at hand. Yahoo says 16. I actually think it was closer to 40. He had to tackle on a pretty good amount of points there to the Redskins defense because the Giants didn't do too much at all in terms of yardage there. So it was a pretty good score. So going to take good scores up and down your lineup to get over 200. And Mighty Midgets got that this week. While Hillbillies on PCP, still a good score, but he is desperate. Well, maybe not desperate for a win, but he really needed it. Like I said, for reasons already explained, trying to either move up or avoid dropping down in the standings there. He went with Alex Smith this week, who has kind of said he's been trending down and going against Phillip Rivers, who has been trending up. And it was about a 30-point difference between Rivers and Alex Smith this week. You still would have lost if you had started Phillip Rivers. So don't be too hurt about that. But you definitely could use those extra points. Alex Smith, 37.5. Your 3 receivers, Demaryius Thomas, Antonio Brown, and Adam Thielen. Actually, Antonio Brown outscored your quarterback just under 44 points. Antonio Brown has been on a tear lately. Some of this... I know Dutling has been harping on the Steelers lately, but some of those catches that Antonio Brown made in that game, dragging his toes along the sideline and grabbing, holding on, he's so good that it's ridiculous. I understand full well that he is a bit of a showboat and full of himself, but he shows it through his, I think more in the things he does, his nonverbals. When they asked him questions about that catch in the game, what he thought about it, he was like, I was just fortunate about he kept going on about the fundamentals, having the sound fundamentals, and Ben making a perfect throw where only he could get it. So when they ask him about it, he says all the right stuff, but I can't deny that his actions and stuff that you see definitely give him the sort of showboat personality there. So can't really you can argue it both ways probably. So anyway, so Antonio Brown, his 44 points. Let's see, Demaryius Thomas only 6 6.5. Thielen, 17. Running backs, McCoy and Jordan Howard. Again, looks like Howard had all of the Bears' rushing yards, which were only 6. And then LaShawn McCoy, no touchdowns there. He only had 5 points for you. Delaney Walker, looks like he had a touchdown, 16.5. McCaffrey, kind of a quiet game for him, only 11.7 in the flex there. Kicker is Lutz from New Orleans. Looks like he had 2 field goals, 2 PATs, about 10 points from him. And you plugged and played the Oakland defense, who is going against the first game for Paxton Lynch. I think he, I think it was the first. Was it the first interception the Raiders have had all season? And coming in week 12, I believe, is what happened there. Kind of. So you basically, Brian, you got what you were hoping for this week. So you got some sacks and turnovers. They won the game. But unfortunately, Trevor said, I think Paxton Lynch, he sprained his ankle, went out of the game. And actually, Trevor Siemian came back and took back over for the Broncos here. And I believe he actually led at least two. I think he got him 2 touchdowns there. So, which would have been the only 2 touchdowns that they had. So definitely took down your defensive score there. Could have been a lot better, but you basically got what you wanted because your other defenses didn't do too good either. So Denver, they've spiraled into nothing these last few weeks. Not sure. I mean, they were great the first couple weeks. I don't know what's happened to them. Detroit's defense has been pretty good in spots here, but they weren't this week. And you actually made the right play with the Oakland Raiders defense. But it was not enough to get past Mighty Midgets and his 2 sexy Hondos this week. He is in, with this win, he gets to 4. He's also 4-8 now. And he jumps ahead of a couple people and is in 10th place. While, let's see, Hillbillies on PCP are down 9-3. They are in 2nd place. All right, so that is it for the Week 12 matchups. Let's just take a quick look at what is going to happen in the, looks like it's going to be an eventful final week of this regular season, as we have Shawshank and Hillbillies on PCP, currently in the top 2 spots. All right, start with Shawshank. He's playing Space Antelope. Both of those guys want to get the win. Space Antelope probably wants to move up a little bit if he can, because he could possibly, he'd be hoping for a Hillbillies loss. Actually, I think that even if you can win and defeat, said if you win and Hillbillies lose, I think you're still too far behind in points to get a bye week. You could possibly move up in the standings. But Shawshank, he's looking to hold on. Said if Space Antelope gets the win and knocks off Shawshank this week, and if Hillbillies on PCP can win, they would both be 10-3, and Brian would actually leapfrog Josh into 1st place for the regular season here, thanks to big lead on point totals. Unless Josh can outscore Brian this week by over 100 points. Then we've got Hillbillies. If he loses, he's got FC Bahuric and Space Antelope right on his tail. But they are both pretty far behind in points. So even if who's Hillbillies is playing Gags this week, who needs to get a win to have a chance. Let's see. So if Brian loses to Gags, that would knock him to 9-4. So even if both FC Bahuric and Space Antelope could win, that would move them to 9-4. But even if he loses, Brian can't go. Looks like he can't move down because he is so far ahead in points. So FC Bahuric and Space Antelope you are basically fighting for the 3 and 4 spots there, back and forth. So whoever's number 3 will get the number 6 seed, which is currently the Skeletor Isotopes, and whoever is number 4 is guaranteed to get Bad Luck Bears in Week 14, first round of the playoffs here. So it's like Bad Luck Bears, he is pretty much locked into that number 5 spot, as he is 6-6. He's 2 games ahead of, or he's 2 games behind either FC Bahorek and Space Antelope. So he can't go up anywhere, but I don't think he can go down either, because he is about 70 or 80 points ahead of the Isotopes. So even if he loses and the Isotopes win, they would both have the same record at 6-7, and he would still remain higher in the standings than the Isotopes. All right, so then we've got 3 teams here at 5 and 7. The Isotopes, Disco, and Gags to Riches, all contending for that number 6 seed. The Isotopes are playing the Bad Luck Wolf Bears. Disco is getting the Bad Luck Bears. So Jay is locked into that number 5 seed, but he could knock Disco out with a loss here if he gets the win and gives him the loss. Then Gags, like I said, he is playing Hillbillies on PCP. So whoever wins this week of those 3 teams is if the Isotopes win, they are in. If they lose, they need both Disco and Gags to lose as well, because then they would all be 5 and 8. We could potentially have a 5 and 8 team in the playoffs this year. That's the way it's going. And man, look, that brings into that. It actually brings into play all the rest of these 4 and 8 teams, because there's because Bad Luck Wolf Bears are still. They actually have more points than Disco and Gags. All right, okay. So we went through the Isotopes. The Isotopes need to either win, or they need. If they lose, they need Disco and Gags to also lose to make the playoffs. Disco, to make the playoffs, you need to win and have. Let's see, the Isotopes lose. Or if you lose, if you lose, you're probably out, because there's no way you'd be able to move up past the Isotopes there. So you must win. Gags, you must win. You're basically in the same spot here. You need the Isotopes to lose. You need Disco to lose, and you need to win. But if you lose, I don't think you're able to get there. So we kind of wrote off Gags maybe a week or 2 ago. A lot of chatter about his trade there, that he was throwing in the towel. But like I said, if he wins this week and the Isotopes and Disco both lose, then he will finish in the number 6 seed there. So he's still got a chance. So a lot of things need to fall into place here. All right, but then we have the Wolf Bears, who are 4 and 8. If they could knock off the Isotopes, and that would move them to 5 and 8. But say you're about Wolf Bears are still about 80 points behind the Isotopes. So even if you can win, and Disco and Gags all lose, I don't think you would be able to make it. Same thing with the Midgets, Possum, and Laser Sharks. I just don't think you have a chance, even if you get a win this week, that the way things, that it's not gonna, none of you are gonna be able to move up due to your low point totals. I think it's fair to say. So what could happen also is, because of the matchups, the Isotopes could end up 5-8. Disco could end up 5-8. Gags could end up 5-8. The Wolf Bears would end up 5-8 by beating the Isotopes. Mighty Midgets could end up 5-8 if he can knock off FC Bahoric. Possum Magic could end up 5-8 if he can beat the Laser Sharks. So actually, Possum and Laser Sharks, the bottom two right now, are playing each other. So you're battling for the bottom here, Possum and Laser Sharks. But said all of you, except for one, whoever loses that matchup, have a chance to move up to 5-8. But that's assuming all the teams on the bottom lose, and we saw what happened this past week, as a lot of them got wins against the top teams here. So it's gonna be pretty interesting to see what happens. All you guys are rooting for a win. So Isotopes, Disco, and Gags, 3 of you guys, we're all fighting for that one last spot. So each one of us is hoping to get a win, or if we're going to lose, that we need those other 2 guys to also lose there. But if all 3 lose, I think it would go to the Isotopes thanks to the point totals. But basically, you just need to win and have the other 2 lose. So it's all riding on getting a win here in week 13 for a lot of people here. So like I said, Shawshank and Hillbillies are pretty much locked into the first 2 seeds. So Hillbillies could move up to number 1 and drop Shawshank to 2. FC Bahoric and Space Antelope both have the same record. They could flip-flop here if one gets a win and one loses. And it said Bad Luck Bears, you're locked in. Isotopes, Disco, and Gags are all fighting for that number 6 seed. And I think the Wolf Bears said even if you do win and all the other things fall into place there, you are probably going to be out anyway. That goes for the Wolf Bears, the Mighty Midgets, Possum Magic, and friggin' Laser Sharks. So it all comes down to the last week of the regular season, playoff positioning, and who is going to claw their way into that last spot. It'll be looking forward to it. It's going to be fun to see what happens. All the matchups are going to be pretty good. It's always good. It's always good when it comes down to the last week of the season. Nothing's finalized here. A lot of shuffling in the standings could happen. So looking forward to it. Win or lose, no matter what happens. It's been a good season. It's been a weird season. All sorts of stuff, as always. So I think that's it. Already over the hour mark. So don't know how that always happens, but let's see. I think that is it for week 12. And all right, we will be back here next week to summarize the final week of the regular season, see how it all played out and how everything fell into place, and we will look forward to entering the playoffs. So, good luck to everyone this week. Matchups are good. A lot of potential ramifications here. So, always what we'd like to see in the last week of the season. So, all right, everyone. See you back here next week. Good luck this week here in the last of the regular season already. And good luck to everyone, but especially good luck to me. So, all right. Thanks, guys. See you here next week.